Dave Talks Comics, Episode 34. Dave Talks Comics is a podcast on the subjects of comic books and cartoons. I talk about comics I have read and cartoons I have watched. Dave Talks Comics can be found on the web at davetalkscomics.com. On Twitter at Dave Talks Comics. Email can be sent to dave at davetalkscomics.com. I talk from my notes on these comics. I don't go panel by panel. I try to do more than just summarize the stories. This isn't a spoiler-free podcast. I will probably be spoiling the stories in the process of talking about them, even though I don't go panel by panel or page by page. On this episode of Dave Talks Comics, I'll be talking about The Question, the next 4 issues of the 1987 series, The Question. That would be issues 4 through 7. And I will be talking about Star Wars Clone Wars, about the next few episodes that I watched from Season 1. The Question. This is the 1987 series, the series that started in 1987, that was written by Denny O'Neil, penciled by Dennis Cowan, and inked by Rick Magyar. I read the first 3 issues a few months before I started doing this podcast, and recently I talked in December. I think I picked up issues 4 through 11, something like that, at a local show. I talked about those, I talked about buying them on a previous, so I've finally gotten around to reading them. So, issue 4 has to do with this, The Question is dealing with this Reverend Hatch, who's kind of this psycho, quasi-religious type who has kidnapped the mayor. Now, the mayor is a bit of a drunk, a bit of a lush, and the mayor is married to a woman that the Question used to be, Vic Sage, the Question used to be in love with. And let's see, at the end of the first issue of The Question, it looked like he was killed, and I think he disappeared for a time, and she thought he was dead. And so then she ends up marrying the mayor, I guess, because he had money. I don't know, because I don't see the attraction. She has a child by a previous relationship, I believe, because I don't think this is years and years later. And the child, she's got to be 7 or 8, something like that, maybe 9. So this issue kind of deals with the resolution of this, dealing with this Reverend Hatch, and things aren't exactly neatly resolved between Myra and Vic. And I don't think she knows that he's the Question. I'm not sure about that. And it has a pretty violent ending. At this point, The Question still doesn't have the mature audience's label on it, but it is a deluxe book, so it's a little more expensive, and it's only available through the direct market, as I understand it. And that issue was the May 1987 issue, and it was called The Sacrifice. And I'm not going to give everything away, but and let's see, in the letters page, not Dennis Cowan, but Denny O'Neil, I guess they're both named Dennis, like to give a recommended reading, and his recommended reading in this one was Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman, which I have never read. I don't know if I've read any of these so far of his recommended readings. Now, number 5, issue 5 of the question, deals with, well, the city's kind of in disarray after the events of the previous issue, where the law enforcement is kind of broken down. So the question is kind of spending some time going around town trying to help to keep the peace, I guess. And you get a little bit in here with the mayor who's still drunk, who's at a press conference, and, he's literally drinking at the press conference. Meanwhile, out in the streets, everything is going completely nuts. And it's told through these different sequences. There's this woman named Maud who's waiting for a bus, but, city services have broken down, so there's no bus. On the very first page, you get this, something about the founding of the city. And, by the way, the story is called Cityscape. And there's a statue of this guy who founded the city. And that's what Maud's sitting underneath while she's waiting for this bus. And then you get a little bit more about Myra because of what she did towards the end of the previous issue. And you also get there's this short little sequence with this guy who tries to force himself on one of his assistant or his coworker, because they're staying at their office overnight because everything's so crazy out on the streets. They're nervous about going home, and she manages to prevent him from pushing things too far, but then he feels so bad about it that he commits suicide. So it's kind of a grim story. And then there's this whole sequence with this crooked cop who the question saves from these gang members, or these guys who are trying to hold them up. I'm not sure they're gang members, but they're criminals of some kind. And then finally, the recommended reading in this issue is actually a novel, 87th Precinct by Ed McBain. And I haven't read that, but that's one that I think I actually would like to read. So that's it for issue number 5. So I've only read 2 more of the issues, 6 and 7. I still have, I'm going to read, 8 through 11 soon. So issue 6, issue 6 kind of mirrored in some ways issue 2. It's the title of the issue of the story is That Small Rain Down Can Rain. I'm not sure exactly what that means. But like issue 2, it has to do with a guy who's trying to impress his father. It's a guy who's the son of a criminal, some kind of a crime boss, maybe not a big crime boss, but a guy who's running a gang or of some sort. And he's kind of obsessed with pleasing his father. It's a different guy from the guy in the second issue, but and a different father. So I thought it was kind of weird that you get 2 stories of the same nature, basically, within 6 issues. But the visual storytelling in this is great, this whole thing, because the guy decides to burn his face with acid, I think it is, with some sort of chemical, so I'm just generically calling it acid. And his father has tasked him with killing somebody, or, Is it his father that's tasked him with killing this guy? Or does he just decide to go out and do it to impress his father? Because like I said, he's obsessed with the idea of impressing his father. And so he goes to pay a visit to this guy. And somehow the question winds up there too. Let's see if I can figure this out relatively quickly. And even though he came there to kill the guy, he ends up helping to fight off his father's people. And it's, and all the while he burned his face in the beginning, so his face is covered with these bandages. It looks a little like the Unknown Soldier, except for he's wearing a pair of glasses. and his hair is all sticking out of the top. So the bandages don't cover his head entirely. So that's... And there's more interaction between Vic and Myra. So that's it for issue 6. And then finally issue 7. Issue 7 was a little strange to me. It introduces this guy named Volk, who's from Romania originally, but the thing that struck me most about him is he kind of looks like Wolverine. From the sideburns and the dark hair. One of his eyes doesn't work anymore, it's blinded. And there's some implication that he's either a wolf or he can turn into a wolf. Or maybe I'm misremembering. Yeah, I'm probably not your most reliable narrator. No, but he was helped by wolves. And he gets... He meets the question, and at first he thinks the question is an enemy, but there's some other gang that's trying to kill Volk because Volk killed somebody at the beginning of the issue, didn't he? Yeah, this guy named I'm not sure. But so this other mob boss calls in these guys from out of town, and they're all supposed to go after Volk and take him down, and it doesn't exactly work out that way, and Volk gets a little bit of help from the question, but Volk is pretty tough. And, it's an okay story. So far, I'm not completely overwhelmed by the question. I don't think it's great. The art is good, and the covers are beautiful. But, I don't know, the story's... I'm not overwhelmed by them. It's just I'm going to continue to read this at least through issue 11. I'm not sure if I'll buy any more issues after that. I forgot to mention. Let me see. What was the recommended reading in issue 11? Steppenwolf by Herman Hesse, and that's one that I think I actually read when I was much younger. I think in my teens I read that. Yes, I believe I did. I'm not sure if I've read a couple of his, I think. Yeah, because he also wrote Siddhartha, didn't he? Which was the story of the Buddha. But that wasn't that one. That was another one. But I think I did read Steppenwolf. But I can't remember what it was about. Anyway, question... It's interesting. It's definitely a product of its time. It's definitely something you wouldn't see comics like this today. Not from DC probably, because it's fairly bloody. There's lots of people getting killed, people getting acid poured in their face, people getting stabbed through the chest. It doesn't pull its punches as far as the violence, and this was kind of, I guess, the first time since the golden age of comics that this had been the case, at least in a mainstream publisher like DC. So that's it for the stories themselves. But then I also wanted to talk about the back covers, because they've got some beautiful stuff on the back covers and some house ads here. I was just kind of, when I was getting ready to record this, I was kind of flipping through the issues, trying to remind myself of what was in them, since it's been a few weeks since I read these. And I noticed how beautiful some of these back covers were, these full-page ads, or these full ads for other DC comics. So I actually went back and looked at the first 3 issues. The first issue has an ad for Matt Wagner's 4-issue Demon miniseries, which I've never read. I've read a little bit of Matt Wagner's books, and I'm intrigued. I think I'd like to pick this up. I think that needs to go on my list of stuff to buy. Maybe I can find it at Heroes Con. Issue 2. Oh, you know what? Issue 2 wasn't the one that had that. It was issue 3 and issue 6 that have stories of guys trying to please their fathers. Yeah. Issue 2 had an ad for Star Trek from DC Comics. I wasn't too wild by that. And there were some other house ads in here, but nothing that really blew me away. But issue 3 has, on the back cover, has an ad for the new Justice League by Giffen and DeMatteis and Maguire. And Terry Austin. Huh, I didn't realize that. Which I've read a little bit of, but I have not read it, from the beginning. And there's also an ad in here for a Mr. Miracle story done by Mark Evanier and Steve Rude. I'm not familiar with that. Although sometimes they would advertise things that never came out, so I'm not sure if that. I'll have to look that up and see if that came out. And was there anything else in this issue? No. Issue 4, the back cover is an ad for Suicide Squad, which is great, with the exception of the fact that if you read, I should talk about it. It's a bunch of wanted posters for the different members of the squad: Mindboggler, Bronze Tiger, Plastique, Deadshot, Enchantress, Captain Boomerang. And the big text on these wanted posters is great, but then you have that generic text which looks like Latin or just gibberish: lorem ipsum dotor sit amet, blah blah blah, on these in the small text. They may as well have made it illegible instead of having just that. And I don't know, maybe they thought when it got printed it wouldn't be legible, but I guess with the advanced printing techniques of the day, they were more legible than they thought. I don't know. Pure speculation on my part. And then there's a cool little ad for The Outsiders, which shows them all kind of in silhouette but in different panels. And this is on the letters page. I really like that. Geoforce, Metamorpho, Black Lightning, Halo, Katana, and Looker. And I guess it just says The Outsiders. It doesn't say Batman The Outsiders. And there's a quote from Bob Dylan: "To live outside the law, you must be honest." That's issue 4. Issue 5 on the back cover has an ad for the Dr. Fate 4-issue miniseries by DeMatteis, Keith Giffen, and Dave Hunt. Now, I read this probably a year and a half ago, something like that. And I had a hard time making heads or tails of it. I may have written about it in my blog, Reading for the Trade. I'm not sure. I can't remember at this time. But I had I had a hard time figuring out what it was all about. I like Keith Giffen's artwork, but I don't know. Sometimes it's a little hard to follow, and I'm not. No, wait. I'm not going to blame him for this, or not entirely blame him for this. I just found the story to be a little hard to follow. It was a little too. Sometimes less is more, but sometimes I need more than just a little bit to figure out what's going on. And if that would kill the magic, then so be it. But I had a hard time following that series. Now, there's also an ad for Batman Annual number 11, which I have not read. And it says, Batman Annual number 11, Two Tales of Love and Terror. Mortal Clay by Alan Moore and George Freeman. Lovebird by Max Allan Collins and Norm Breyfogle. And I want to get my hands on this. And the cover is by John Byrne. And it says John Byrne after somebody, but I can't read the name of who it is. It looks like a familiar sort of pose, but it's not jogging my memory. So obviously this is done in... He's actually copying the layout of this cover from somebody, but... Now, issue 6, the back cover is an ad for Green Arrow, the Longbow Hunters, which is, as stated here, a 3-book prestige format series coming in May. I guess May of 87? Must be 88. I'm not sure. Maybe it's 87. And it's a lot of green. It's kind of a, not two-tone, but there's a lot of green in this. And there's 3 panels, and then, well, there's 4 panels. You get a shot of Green Arrow. He's holding up but all you can see is his eye and half of his face, and he's holding up an arrow which is pointing upward at his eye. And then there's 3 panels of him. Well, not entirely of him. One is of the Black Canary. And there's another of him with a woman, which I assume is the Black Canary. And I thought it was kind of cool, but then I was looking at it and I realized, wait a minute, what's up with her arm? It just looks kind of strange. And I'm going to post a bunch of images to go along with this, but it really looks kind of weird. And you can see her, it just looks way too thin is what it looks. It just looks way too thin. And the angle is at, I don't know, it looks kind of deformed. I don't know. And that's the middle panel of because you have 1 panel on the left and then 3 panels on the right, stacked horizontally. And I've never read this, but this is one of those things that I want to read. Give a try to. Oh yeah, and then inside there's a couple of house ads, one of which is for The Shadow by Andrew Helfer and Bill Sienkiewicz. And Shadow's a character I've always been intrigued by since I heard my first exposure to it was some of the radio shows from the 30s or 40s. But I like the artwork, the Bill Sienkiewicz artwork, and so I'm kind of intrigued by this. I'm not sure how many issues this series ran. And then on the other side, there's an ad for Who's Who, the 1987 update, which I think was the first update, because I think there was also a 1988 update of Who's Who. And I've started to go through the Who's Who books. If I ever get through all of the original run, which was 26 issues, I may just continue on with this. And this image was drawn by John Byrne, and I recognize some of the characters, and some of them look familiar, but I don't know their names. And some of them I know their names, but I don't really know very much about them. At least 3 of them here. 1, 2, 3 of them here, I believe, are from the Young All-Stars. And Booster Gold is here. And there's a character from the Green Lantern Corps, but I can't remember her name. She's got orange skin. And there's some other characters that look familiar, but I don't remember their names. Okay, so finally, issue number 7. The back ad is for a comic book called Silverblade. DC presents Jonathan Lord in a new 12-issue maxi series, Silverblade. Yesterday he starred in film fantasies. Today he lives them. This looks kind of interesting. I think I can get it for relatively cheap. It's one of those series I want to give a try to. It kind of makes me think of not necessarily because it's just like it, but it makes me think of what was the name of that? Oh, now I'm going to completely blank on it. That guy who, from the DC animated, Batman the Animated Series, there was a character who had been a vigilante, a movie character who Bruce Wayne had seen when he was a kid, and I am still blanking on it. It was something like the Phantom. It wasn't the Phantom, because the Phantom is another. The Silver something or other? I'm not sure. But this certainly made me think of that. And it was voiced by Adam West. Did the voice. He was kind of like a precursor to Batman. But I don't think he had actually been a superhero like Batman. But somehow they team up in that episode. And I'm not sure. I think it was first appeared in the cartoon, and it may be one of those things that eventually made its way into the comic books, but I'm not sure. Anyway, that's it for the question, and that's it for the ads on the back of the question. And as I said, I scanned a lot of the ads most of the ads that I talked about, and I will provide a link to them on the webpage at davetalkscomics.com. Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 1, Episodes 8, 9, and 10. I didn't anticipate talking about the Clone Wars again so soon, but 2 of these 3 episodes I thought were awesome. The other one, it was okay. First, the bad. Well, not really bad, it just isn't great, and the reason for it not being great is really the inclusion of the character of Jar Jar Binks. Episode 8 is titled Bombad Jedi, and in it, Jar Jar Binks goes on a mission with Padme Amidala, who of course is the mother of Luke Skywalker, and Leia Organa, I think that was her name, Princess Leia. And it's a diplomatic mission. She has with her C-3PO, who of course is a translator and protocol droid, and Jar Jar Binks. Well, it turns out that the people she's going to negotiate with, some of whom she knows, have changed sides and joined the Forces of Darkness. I can never remember what it's not the Rebellion. I can never remember what it's called. Anyway, so basically she gets captured, and it's up to Jar Jar Binks to save her, because 3PO can't do anything. And of course, it's slapstick comedy. It's just silliness, and basically, he practically, with some help from one of a native creature, he basically almost lucks his way into saving Padme. And they capture this guy, Newt Gunray, who plays a part in the next couple episodes, who is an important character in the Forces of Darkness, as I'm taking to call them for now. So that's episode 8. It gets much better with episode 9. So episode 9, Newt Gunray has been captured. Count Dooku sends Asajj Ventress. She's the female Sith who showed up in at least one previous episode. She was in the movie that started the series, and I think she was in a couple other episodes. And once again, there's no appearance by what's his name, Anakin Skywalker. But his Padawan, Ahsoka, does appear in this episode. Ahsoka Tano, and she is working with another Jedi Master, Luminara Unduli. And so they are supposed to be interrogated. The idea at the beginning of the episode is that they're supposed to interrogate Viceroy Newt Gunray. But as that's beginning, Asajj Ventress shows up and basically wreaks havoc on this station where they're at. And the battle between Ahsoka and Luminara and Ventress is just awesome. I mean, it's completely cool. It is just awesome. I mean, Ahsoka is still a little too overconfident, which is the way she's been portrayed. I'm hoping, but I'm really expecting that eventually she's going to start to mature as this series progresses and become a little less risk-taking and understanding, and I'm not sure what happens to her in the end, but it's so far it's interesting seeing her develop. Now, by contrast, Master Luminara Unduli, and despite the title Master, this is a woman, is of course a Jedi Master, and so she is much more with it. She is much more on top of it. She is not. She knows what her abilities are. She understands how to use the Force, what to do, what not to do. She does not get overconfident in the way that Ahsoka does, and Asajj Ventress proves to be much more deadly in this episode than she has been in her previous appearances, in which she is for the most part been neutralized or been deflected. So that's episode 9, which is called Cloak of Darkness. And then episode 10 is called Lair of Grievous. So once again, no Anakin Skywalker and really no Ahsoka. You get a little bit of her, I think, in this episode. But for the most part, the focus in this episode is on another Jedi Master named Kit Fisto. And his former Padawan, Nadar Veb. And Nadar Veb is even though he is no longer a Padawan, he is still kind of like Ahsoka in that he is still kind of overconfident, but actually maybe that's not the best way to put it, because he actually is a little too vengeful, which is something that I think if you watch the original films and if you listen to what the Jedi Masters say, they say you can never hold, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you can't hold vengeance in your heart. You can't and Nadar Veb cannot seem to let go of certain things when... Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit. So I should talk a little bit what the episode's about. So Viceroy Newt Gunray, escaped in the prior episode, at the end of episode 9. In episode 10, Kit Fisto and Nadar Veb are sent with a few clone troopers to go find him, and they think they know where he is. Well, it turns out it's kind of a trap, and where they've been led to is the home of General Grievous, who isn't home when they get there, but is on his way home. And it turns out this whole thing was planned by Count Dooku. And so what you basically get is a fight between... This is another one of these three-way fights. You get a fight between General Grievous on the one hand, and some of his robots, and then on the other side you have Kit Fisto and Nadar Veb. And it's a really good battle. At first it seems like Fisto and Veb have the upper hand, then it seems like General Grievous has the upper hand, and you learn a little bit about General Grievous. I really didn't know a lot about him. Most of what I know about him I know from reading online, not from the episodes themselves. But it's a really good fight, and once again, the bad guys seem to come out ahead in the end. And I don't know if that's part of why I think it's such a good episode. But both of these episodes, episodes 9 and 10, excellent episodes. And honestly, these could be... I don't know if they're great... gateway episodes in that they don't really explain everything, but at the same time there's great action in these, and if you were trying to sell somebody on these series, these might be good ones to watch. And then once again, even though they don't feature the main character, or who I believe is the main character throughout the series, which is Anakin Skywalker, but still, episode 9, Cloak of Darkness, and episode 10, Lair of Grievous, totally awesome episodes, totally worth watching. If you haven't watched any of this series, you might want to start with those and then go back to the beginning, because those will give you a taste for how good this series really can be. Okay, a couple more things about Star Wars Clone Wars. One of them is about the series so far, so season 1 up through episode 10, and the other specifically about episode 10. About the series so far, what I wanted to say was that I was taken aback, a bit surprised, but also a bit impressed by the fact that they actually show people getting killed. Now, you don't see big spurts of blood or anything like that, but, I mean, for instance, in episode 9, there's even somebody, and I don't think this is the first time this has happened, there's somebody who's killed by getting impaled from behind with a lightsaber. And, I mean, you see the lightsaber come sticking out of their chest. And I'm not talking about a droid either, I'm talking about a human. And then because there's plenty of droids that get taken down, and other aliens, which probably isn't seen as quite as brutal as seeing humans getting killed for whatever reason, and you could argue that both ways, I suppose. And then the other comment I had was it was nice to see in episode 10 that Kit Fisto. And I haven't talked about the voice acting at all. I think so far it's been very good. I'm familiar with some of the names of the voice actors, some I am not, but a familiar name showed up in episode 10, and that is Phil Lamar. And he's the one who does the voice of Kit Fisto, and I recognized his voice immediately. And I know him best from, well, the first thing I saw him on was Mad TV back in the 90s when he was on that. But the first thing I remember him doing voice acting for is I'm not sure which one came first, actually, now that I think about it. Well, the two things are Samurai Jack. He does the voice of the title character, Samurai Jack, and he's great in that, I think. Although he's very good in that, although that's a series that really the visuals are the best part of the series. But, I mean, definitely, he does a great job in that. And then the other is Justice League and JOU. He did the voice of John Stewart, the Green Lantern. And he was great in that also. I mean, the Green Lantern has a great arc. The whole romance with Hawkgirl and all that. So, so those are the two things that I forgot to mention, which I'd been thinking about, but that I wanted to mention. And I think that's it for now. That's it for episode 34 of Dave Talks Comics. Questions or comments can be posted on the episode page at davetalkscomics.com or wherever you find this posted. Or you can tweet them to Dave at Dave Talks Comics. Or you can email your questions or comments to Dave at davetalkscomics.com. Next time on Dave Talks Comics, episode 35, I will be continuing my series on my commentary on Who's Who and the official handbooks of the Marvel Universe. And I will be talking about Wolverine Blood Hungry, a story by Peter David and Sam Keith that appeared in Marvel Comics Presents about 20 some odd years ago. Thank you for listening.